Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Inspired to Act from Thrive Ireland. I'm Diane Holt.
And I'm Will Leach. Hello, it's lovely to be back. And already we're busy getting in touch with people with great stories to tell of faith and community or stepping out boldly, often as leaders. So thanks to the Community Relations Council for supporting us and to Commission Christian Radio for Studio 2 here.
Our guest this time has a CV which Will and I are exhausted just reading. Tim Magowan is an experienced charity leader, coach and mentor. He's currently Executive Director at the 174 Trust in Belfast, but he's worked for organisations you'll know like Corrymeela, Tearfund, Christian Aid, as well as serving time as a probation officer.
And there's more. Tim mentors and coaches, sees who people are and who they could be. And he's even delved into the shiny corporate world of PR. Tim, welcome to Inspired to Act.
Hiya. Good to see you.
Welcome, Tim. It's lovely to see you. So, tell us and our listeners, because many of them won't know what the 174 Trust is, and what does it do?
So a good way to start that is, where is it? So it's on the Antrim Road. It was Murder Mile. Within 5 square miles of where we are, 577 people were murdered during the Troubles. So it's the epicentre of part of the Troubles. And it's also one of the most economically deprived areas in Belfast. And the Trust was a church. It set up a little charity. The church shut down and the charity bought over the church buildings, and over the last 40 years have repurposed them, cut to today, and we now support 20,000 people a year, mainly marginalised people, mainly people from the local communities, but a whole range of diversities. And what the Trust have done particularly brilliantly is to find local people and supported them to run their own projects. So, for example, we have Linda, who had a child who was disabled. And Linda has come to us, got involved with our disability club, and now runs disability clubs for 80 children, young people with disabilities every week. Fabulous. And so we have Disability Project. We've got 2 nurseries on site. We've got 2 boxing clubs. We have got 200 people a week come to AA. And we have about 8,000 people a year come to our concerts and classes in our art centre, which is in the beautifully repurposed church building. So it's a real wonderful amalgam of different things that the Trust does. And I see it as a real expression of like enabling people to develop as whole, full people.
Yeah, I've been in the building, and I've also been involved in running a cross-community choir there back in the day, Tim. So I loved it, and I love the people around and about. Is there an Irish language nursery school as part of your...
Yes. So way back in the day, the Irish language nursery came to us and said they can't find premises, and Bill Shaw, my predecessor, Presbyterian minister, took them in. Literally, they started in his study, and they now have a nursery on site, but that nursery has then grown over the years to being a whole primary school, a bund school. And Seamus, who runs it, I was with him today, is just so appreciative of the fact that the Trust has helped to nurture that bit of Irish culture and bit of Irish identity, which there is in the area.
So really it's a Presbyterian church that has so many things now that are a part of it that are totally holistically engaging within the local community, and that's an expression of the faith around and about.
Yeah.
This is all great. It all costs money. Who's paying for this, Tim?
We get money from a wide range of different sources. So we have government contracts which help to pay for our disability services in our nursery. We have a lot of grant and trust funds that pay for a lot of our arts programming and some of our core work. And then we have some private philanthropy. So my predecessor, Bill, was particularly good at helping to generate that money. But that is always, for me, coming in as executive director, that's always the challenge, is where, like, literally I could tell you where our cliff edge is. And that's the challenge of running a charity, of knowing how much money you have, what you can spend on, and trying to make sure that you have enough to keep the doors open in the short and the longer term.
Because it just isn't about looking for work and getting paid for it. That's just not how it happens.
No, and you're trying, I always say to people, we're about the mission and the money. So fundamentally we're there because we want, like, our way of describing it is we want thousands of marginalised people to survive and to thrive. And that's what the Trust does. but we also need to make sure that we're doing that in a way which is economically sustainable. And it may be worth saying that we also, the trust has done well, so we're open for corporate hire. We have some tenants, we generate some of our own money ourselves, so that helps to pay some of the, who wants to pay for the photocopier or for the plumber to come out to service the toilets? But it turns out those things are really important, but nobody wants to fund that. So finding other sources of funding is really important then to help to support it.
And it's just one of those names in Belfast. From when I was a student in the 80s, I heard about 174. It started up essentially when I started as a student, and I became in my consciousness quite quickly as a young Christian. You've been going well over 40 years. The need is still there, and I imagine growing.
Yes, it's obviously a different kind of need. So back in the day, we had a man who came in who was about 70 who lived right beside us. And he came in wide-eyed because the church had been all redone and was so beautiful. He said in his day, when he was 6 and lived behind us, he had a collection of live ammunition, which he kept on his fireplace because we were right in that kind of centre piece of the conflict, right on the interface of a couple of different areas and right beside the big military base, Girdwood. And so obviously then, one of the huge challenges, the biggest challenge was the impact of the conflict. And now there's the intergenerational impact of that. Thankfully, the conflict obviously has calmed itself. But one of the people, for example, that goes to AA was telling me his house was bombed 26 times. So in the community, there is still that intergenerational trauma. And there's also just huge needs. So where we are is the second most deprived area in the whole of Northern Ireland. So right across the board, the educational attainment, the economic attainment in the area, the social need in the area. Our social services are saying that our area is the area they have the biggest demand for their services. So therefore, I am really glad that we are there, able to provide the services we are, and able in the main to be working with local people, supporting them to meet need in the local community.
And Tim, I know the journey that you've been on, at least a little part of it, because I've been a part of that journey too. But where were you brought up and what was your family life like?
So I grew up in Ballymoney. I was in Lockbrigham before that, but mainly in Ballymoney. My dad was a Presbyterian minister. My mum was a teacher.
That makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Interestingly, my mum and dad both had difficult starts to life. My mum was adopted. My dad was fostered at a really young age. Interestingly, both of them were born and grew up for part of their life in North Belfast. So there's a lovely kind of circular piece for me. But what I have seen was that my Granny Bessie and my Aunt Jean, who took my parents in, they took in children who were vulnerable and marginalised and gave them a life, gave them stability and opportunity. And my parents flourished and went on. My mum became an English teacher, supported thousands of people to get their GCSEs. My dad became a pastor and, centre of the local community pastor. And I saw how, with some nurture and support, people who are marginalised can do well. And I think that at a very deep level for me has been a big driver in what my career has been about. I've had lots of influences along the way, but that's kind of almost literally it's been in my DNA.
And how amazing they found each other when one was fostered and one was adopted. That's actually quite amazing. Yeah. So your dad was a minister, the Presbyterian minister in Ballymoney when you were born?
Yes, so Ballymoney's so Presbyterian that they have 3 Presbyterian churches, Diane.
And it's not a big town.
No.
And they had 3 at that time?
Yes,
right.
Of course.
There's been no more since, no?
Of course, no. Yes, and he was a Presbyterian minister of St James's in Ballymoney.
Okay.
Where'd you go to school?
Dalriada.
Yeah, you see, I was really jealous of the Dalriada boys because you had something we at Corrymeela didn't have.
Was it purple blazers?
No, it was girls.
I was going to say, I knew it was girls.
Yes. Well, sorry, Will. That is absolutely true. Yes, great.
You knew how to speak to them and everything.
So it's okay, your dad being a Presbyterian minister, but sometimes preachers' kids, they go off the rails a wee bit. Do you remember your own faith journey and when you made a decision for yourself that was something that you were, that something that meant something to you?
Yeah, so I I was really fortunate. My parents were very open-minded, allowed me to go out at night, do my thing with my friends, gave me a lot of time and space, and I was so appreciative of that. And I actually had friends whose parents were much more conservative, and then they struggled later on in life, so I really appreciated that. Really, I guess, in terms of my own faith journey, I guess that really came together for me at university. So all of that preliminary work came together with a real, for a real sense for me at the start of my second year in university. And then I had a really profound second experience in that year, because almost immediately I went to America with Tony Campolo's organisation and worked in an inner city African American community.
What year was that?
1992.
Oh, right.
And that was a profoundly shaping experience. Like literally, it changed my life. I was doing law. I was doing well in law. That was my trajectory. But it took me into a totally different place. And maybe to kind of bring that alive a little bit, the story that I particularly remember from then was every morning we used to shake the hand of this friendly black guy who seemed really nice. And we walked down and we ran the kids club and we came back and he and his friends all seemed friendly. On the last day, they told us that he was the local drug czar and he had allowed us in. None of the girls were to be touched. None of the guys were to be seriously injured. And for me, that was a profound, that story kind of captures the sense of just one, how difficult it was. Like, we had children coming to our clubs who were malnourished. They had red tints in their hair. We had parents who had this, what I would only describe as a poverty of hope, watch cartoons all day, just didn't have a sense of possibility. And that was a real shock for me, because we were literally across the river from the Rocky Steps, which is part of the American dream, where he ran up and down the steps and the music pumped. Oh, yes. We were in what felt much more like the American nightmare. But at least the gang leader let us in. He wanted something good. What I saw at that point was he, to a degree, and folk of faith in the local churches were trying to do something positive in the local community. And that was so powerful. And in the middle of all of that, I discovered Martin Luther King, who out of a community just like that, a poor black African-American community, had this soaring rhetoric that I found incredibly inspiring. And I particularly, there's a particular quote which interestingly is on the wall at 174 Trust, where King says, "I have the audacity to believe that everyone has the right to 3 square meals a day for their body, education and culture for their mind, and dignity, equality and freedom for their spirit. I believe what self-centered people have torn down, other-centered people can build back up again." That, for me, was just profound. I remember sitting in the flight on the way home thinking, I need to take a few years to work out how I can play a part in a world which is a little bit more just. And so I decided not to go on. I finished my law degree, but not to go on and qualify as a lawyer. And I was really fortunate. A job came up at Christian Aid, and I began to work on fair trade.
So you moved from justice into social justice.
Yes, nicely done, Diane. Nicely done.
Yeah, no,
nicely
I find that really interesting, and those profound experiences in our lives really do shape us differently. So you finished your law degree. What happened then?
I lucked out with almost no experience. I got a job as a youth worker for Christian Aid. And so that was my next 5 years. And in the middle of that, discovered fair trade. Christian Aid were talking about fair trade. And that became, I guess, my cause for the next 5 years. And it was really exciting. Like we got a lot of fair trade goods in the supermarkets for the first time ever, raised a lot of awareness, got people, writing to coffee manufacturers or trainer manufacturers, helping people to see the connections between us and the developing world, that they weren't just victims. Very often they were producers. They were producing stuff for us and we were paying them a low wage. And at the same time, I was then discovering in the scriptures all of this amazing material about justice. And I was thinking as I was driving here, I spent the day with this amazing guy called Jim Wallace. And Jim Wallace has got this phenomenal story where he took the Bible and cut out all of the verses to do with poverty and social justice. and he holds up the Bible. And of course it falls apart because there's 2,000 of those verses in the Bible. And he says, this is the American Bible because it doesn't have the poverty and justice, which is right at the core. And that for me was a profound realization that the faith journey was a journey about bringing change not just to individuals, but to the whole of society and making it fairer for all of us.
You see, that's interesting because it's about change, it's about helping people. Everything you've talked about at 174 was about helping people, but you're talking about social change, which in the minds of those who are nervous of what you do would be political activism. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a wee minute, he wants to change things. He needs to keep his nab out and do the Christian stuff, but not want to change society. And that's, you're going to come up against that all the time, aren't you?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the awkward, the inconvenient truth, Will, is that's what the Gospels call us to. That is...
It's a blueprint for revolution.
Yeah. Jesus was killed because he was Jesus' Lord. He was a challenge to Caesar. And all the way through the scriptures, you have Isaiah, Jeremiah railing and saying we've got to live in a more just world. And that is part of the Christian story, I believe. It's incredibly... And so I feel I've been really fortunate because I had opportunities to play a part in that and to help others to play a part. So fair trade's one of those things. Many of the churches really stood up around Poverty History or the IF campaign. And, they seem like golden days now because things have changed. But goodness, we've achieved so much, 0.7% GDP going to AIDS, a reduction in debt, the Jubilee campaign. There were some phenomenally positive steps that have happened.
And why move from Christian Aid then to, was it the probation service came next, or was there something in between?
Yes, I trained as a social worker. I felt I'd done my part with fair trades. And I wanted to take some of the experience I had and apply it more locally. I'd begun to volunteer in a local hostel and I'd begun to become more aware of local poverty issues. And I trained as a social worker and then got a job as a probation officer. And so I guess it was a very different. It was working with individuals in a much deeper way. I wrote court reports. I had some funny little stories. I had 2 on probation for joyriding tractors just outside Banbridge.
As you do.
It's not funny, actually.
No,
yes,
no.
It was actually.
Sounds funny.
You're right. It was really serious. They could have killed somebody, and they caused a lot of damage. But I also saw a very different part of Northern Ireland. From I grew up in a very sheltered, middle class world, and so. One of the stories that's really stuck with me was my most prolific offender, who hundreds of burglaries. I went back in his case file one day to try to understand his journey and discovered he'd first come to police attention aged 8, standing on a bridge with a can of harp. And the police said to him, "What are you doing, son?" And he said, "I went and asked my mum for her dinner." And she said, "Clear away off, but there's a can of harp to keep you going." That's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking that he just never had a chance. So of course he developed drink issues. Of course he needed money for the drink, and that then led to his offending. And I wrote hundreds of reports for court. I never wrote one report where there wasn't some significant dysfunction in the family or friendship context that led to that. So that was very profound for me to have that experience.
Remembering our sister podcast, Commission Files, and the interview with the prison governor, yes,
and the senior
and
manager
basically,
from Hidebank,
I think there was some ridiculous statistic like 84% of the young offenders in Hidebank have some sort of learning difficulty.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think we just don't understand exactly what it is that we're doing. Rather than enabling and supporting people with seriously difficult challenges in their lives, we lock them up. But I have to say that was a very encouraging episode.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you're talking about justice and we have a justice system.
Yeah.
And that means a slightly different thing with the word justice than it does mean to most people generally. And of course, when something goes through the courts, it's because there's a victim.
Yeah.
and there's somebody hurting, damaged in some way or another, and quite possibly traumatised by the actions of individuals. So it's never simple and it's never black and white. And in the probation service, you must have been in the middle of that mental battle about what was right and what was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really important to remember there are victims to this. I tended to be working with young people who were creating those problems. And for me, the most effective way to stop them offending was to help them to stabilise and help them to make better life choices. And in fact, that's the way we were trained. We were trained in it's called a form of motivational interviewing, which is if you continue to steal you can continue to steal cars. It's a free world, but that has consequences. However, if you take other choices in your life, where could that lead to? And very often the difference when there's one positive person in their lives. Sometimes that's a girlfriend, sometimes it's a granny or a mum. So for one of them, a chef arrived out of nowhere and took one of my young lads under his wing. I never saw him again. Great result. And that's good for him, and ultimately that's better for society.
And it just shows you the impact that we can have if we literally unlock the potential and show one person just the amazing person that they've been, created in God's image.
Yeah.
And, I think that's what we need to think about a wee bit more in terms of, what we are called to be and to do as Christians. But I'm really interested that you were international development, then you came back locally and you were almost working on a more personal level, but then you went back to international development. So you ended up in Tearfund. How did that happen?
I really missed working in the charity world. It was like a loss to me. I hadn't quite realised. I'm really glad that I took the decisions that I did, and I grew so much. I learnt so much. I developed, my skill base developed hugely. Social work was so good for me. But I had a real passion to go back and work for international development. And I lucked out. A job came up with Tearfund, which was about volunteer management. And so it brought together my international development experience and essentially my social work experience. And then very quickly, just the way things opened up, suddenly there was an opportunity to become the local director. Suddenly there was an opportunity for me to help to set up Tearfund in the Republic of Ireland. Suddenly there was an opportunity for me to restructure our Scottish team and our Welsh team. So just things opened up. That was really exciting.
Or it could be that you were very good relationally and enabled things to happen to him. I don't mean to.
I was thinking exactly that, because I was thinking to myself, it opened up that we were able to. It needs someone with leadership and vision and the drive to push that stuff through. And you were in charge at the time, so whether you want to or not, you got to take some credit for the fact that there were all these things done.
Well, thank you. And that is very kind. And of course, I'm sitting with one of my big money summer signings from 2010, Diane, is that right? 2011. That's right. So Dan was working at the Link and there was an opportunity came up, and it was great to have you on board.
Yeah, how things knitted together, I think. And I do believe that God has things, moving around in a plan. And I also am really interested in the fact that you're working as a probation officer and training as a social worker really give you an insight into individuals, people. Obviously, you've also got a skill and an ability strategically and in that way. So those two things have run in parallel. What is it that you really are passionate about, or do you just want to do everything, Tim, and you just...
Because he has done quite a bit.
I love the sense of being part of some kind of social change. So I love being part of the Fair Trade campaign or the Make Poverty History campaign. Mobilising people around a campaign like that feels really exciting to me. And so particularly the supporting people to work together around a social justice cause, that's probably the core of what gets me up in the morning. And there was a campaign around the Amazing Grace film, which was to do with slavery. Particularly, I guess, a high point was when the G8 Summit came here to Enniskillen all those years ago.
Remember it very well. I was on duty for its entirety.
That has felt really, all of that. Because my sense is the vast majority of people want to live in a better world, but maybe don't know how best to play their part. And so I get excited when I'm able to give people opportunities to do that. That's something that's really amazing for me. And, I particularly think we've run some events with some of our bigger donors. Like we ran an event at Ulster Rugby with this lovely pitch. The British government at that time had given Tearfund £900,000, provided we could find £100,000, which would provide clean water for 150,000 people in Congo. And so we persuaded Ruan Pinar, who was the Ulster Rugby captain, to front the night for us. Mark Simpson, your old colleague, fronted it for us. And it was a wonderful pitch. We said to everybody, for every pound you give, the British government gives £9. And I can't remember, 100 people get a toilet. That's quite something. And so on that night, we raised way more than £100,000, which then unlocked all of that possibility. And so that feeling of being able to play a small part in that process, that's all I do. I play a small part, but it opened up possibility.
We met once when we were discussing with a Christian audience how the story of what Tearfund was doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo ended up as a remarkable story of a family living through strife and trauma in DRC in the 60s, and how people had grown up as part of that and were still living. And I remember the discussion was, well, you'd had the idea of the story and you'd pitched it to the BBC. How many things do you have ideas for in the middle of the night that never get anywhere? Because the ones that do can be remarkable. There must be lots that just never see the light of day.
Yeah, well, I should talk to my wife about that. Yeah. I also have another friend, one of your other BBC colleagues, that says that he has got he used to have an imaginary pin board when we worked together where he'd say, thanks, Tim, for that idea. Let's just stick that on the wall.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll move on. We'll move on. But I guess it brings out a bit of, I'm fortunate, it brings out a little bit of creativity in me that I want to, and if that then unlocks something for somebody else, that's really exciting for me.
You were a very long time with Tearfund, and I get the feeling that perhaps you thought you might have been there for longer, but you moved on again. What happened?
Oh, I felt I'd done everything I could at Tearfund. I'd been there for 14 years. I'd with a couple of teams that had, through restructuring, the things had changed. We'd restructured Scotland and Wales. I'd set up Tearfund in the Republic of Ireland.
You'd got me.
I'd got Diane. I knew the place was in safe hands, all of that. And I just felt it was time for a change. I think I've come to learn that in life. There's that kind of, that life-giving streams within you. You know when there's life and you know when there's not. And I just felt I've made my contribution here. And then I had an opportunity to go and work for Smarts and a big PR company. It was with people I knew. It was a little bit of a risk, but it was the opportunity to work with some multinational organisations and try to do some good with them. And I got the opportunity to do some amazing things. And in that we ran a campaign called Movement to Work, which had with an organisation called Movement to Work, which got young unemployed people into work. And it was the head of Diageo, the head of BAE Systems, the head of Tesco's. I remember standing in a room and thinking, there is literally billions of pounds here. I'll tell you a funny little story. That we pitched the brand message was young people work. And we said to them, could you imagine if instead of feeling sorry for these young people and, being good to them, imagine the good that they can bring. Imagine, look at David Beckham. He came from humble beginnings, and look at the good that he did for Man United and how he's gone on in his world.
He's a country life model now.
Well, he's a country life, yeah.
He's into tweets.
There you go. And so we went to an event, a Moving to Work event, and unbelievably, because it was the head of Diageo, and Diageo, David Beckham represents one of the Diageo brands, they had been to David Beckham's house and got him to tell the story of his first coach and how his first coach had unlocked his potential that led him to come to Man United. That was a wonderful moment for me.
But I think that's really important, that people hear that actually you can make that much of a difference in somebody's life if you take the time to understand what it is that they love, what it is that they can do, what gifts and skills and abilities they have. And I think that's really key. I mean, this podcast is called Inspired to Act, and what is it that inspires people to do things?
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we're so interested in having these conversations.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is, you know, this idea of the one-to-one. Coaching has been a really important part of, and mentoring. I remember our office being a really happy place.
Yeah.
Tim, you'll be glad to know. And I wouldn't be inviting you here anyway, you know, if it had been like really miserable and be like... But actually that's a unique thing in many instances. I meet so many people who are deeply unhappy in their workplaces, and you had the ability to really enable people to reach their potential. You gave them the freedom to do that. You weren't trying to control. What is it that you really love about coaching? Because it takes an awfully long time to become a coach.
Well, it's the first thing I'd say about the staff team. There's an amazing Google study where Google realised that some of their teams did brilliantly and some of their teams did terribly. But they couldn't understand it because everybody was off the scale bright. And being Google, they set up a team to work out why the difference. And it took the team 18 months. They couldn't land it. But the answer was psychological safety. That the teams that were doing well felt psychologically safe enough that they could take risks, they could try half an idea, they could innovate a little bit, they could explore, and there was and they knew that was, they could make a mistake, and that was okay, provided they learnt from it. And so for me, setting that culture in an organisation is crucially important. Partly, people enjoy it much more, but it also innovates lots of good things. And going back to what you were saying before, part of where the ideas come from, where I also was surrounded by people who had good ideas, could stop me from some of my mad ideas, but also were able to build. Derek Hall was really good at that, taking an idea that I had, which is a bit half-cocked, and he was brilliant at going, no, let's do this, and that made it come alive. The coaching thing I love because there's a deep belief in me that there is untapped potential in all of us, and coaching is about enabling the person themselves to connect into that. And I find that all over the show. And actually 174 is a brilliant example of that. That leader I was talking about, Linda, who's passionate about disability, it just oozes out of her and drives so much. Our AA groups who are passionate about trying to find a life beyond drink, and they have set up, there's 13 of those groups now. Like, that's phenomenal. People who are passionate about, we've got a tenant who's really passionate about boxing. He takes kids in. Literally, there's a door for kids from Tigers Bay and there's a door from kids from the New Lodge. And they come in, they do their boxing. Who knew that teaching young people to hit each other in the head was a good peace-building idea, but it's brilliant. And they've found a passion in boxing that has built relationship. And for me, there's something really powerful about that thinking as we think about Northern Ireland, because I think if we can find common cause with people who are different, that's the way that we travel together towards a better future. And that's what the Trust has done so well. And I think that is part of why I love working there.
You were, you mentioned, in the PR world, and the relationship between PR executives and journalists can be an interesting one. It can be very good. It can be it can be a situation where neither particularly trusts each other. And I'm interested because there you were wanting to make a difference in society. And PR companies may or may not be on board with that. At the end of the day, they have clients and they have to promote the client's message. So there would have been clients you'd have loved working for, campaigns, and others where you thought, and this isn't what gets Tim going. So how did you cope with that world? Because a lot of journalists go to that world and come back from it for that reason. Yeah,
so partly they were very good to me. They knew who I was. I was cut from very different cloth.
They knew what they were getting.
And Smarts had a lot of clients that they never put me anywhere close because they knew that I would be a disaster trying to sell, whatever different types of drink or. And they also allowed me to do a lot of their CSR program. That was a big part of my work.
CSR?
Corporate social responsibility. Sorry. And so they felt that was really important for them as an employer to help their staff to feel that they were making a difference, doing something good. So we ran, for example, this wonderful campaign with Bernardo's in Monkstown, where we did all the branding, helping them to develop a campaign to help the entire community to support higher levels of educational attainment. So they were good. But ultimately, well, I missed a little bit, like with Tearfund, I missed being in the charity world and felt I want to get back to that.
Did you feel you'd sold your soul?
Didn't feel I'd sold my soul. Smarts were very good to me, but I felt I missed the cut and thrust of actually being on the ground in a community and playing a part. I also missed working directly with people on the front line. I missed managing staff. I missed the relational bit. There was less of that. It was much more about writing really shiny decks, for PowerPoint decks, and sitting on my computer. And I missed the kind of relational bit. And so an opportunity came up here at Corrymeela, and that was a chance for me to go back into that
back
world.
up to the North Coast as well.
And back up to the North Coast. Do you know, Will, my parents live in Ballycastle. I was working in Corrymeela at their centre. My commute for 5 years, for 2 days a week, was across the beach. That's as good as it gets, that is. Yeah.
That has got to be as good as it gets.
Yeah. That is as good as it gets. Yeah.
And was it meant to be a short time at Corrymeela, or where did you... what was your role? What was your role at Corrymeela?
I came in as an interim.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Slap bang in the middle of COVID.
Yes, just before COVID, that's right. So they had just appointed a chief exec, and sadly he had a heart attack, and that was really tough for them. So I came in to kind of steady the ship, and I just steadied it, and then COVID hit. So there was a funny moment where they appointed me as the permanent executive director, and pretty much my first action was to ban everybody from coming out anywhere close to any of our buildings, which in normal times would have been, we've been taken over by some kind of madman. But obviously in those moments that's the way it was. So, but that was an honor for me and particularly at that time, it was post-Brexit, the peace process was difficult. To be working for an organisation like Corrymeela and trying to play a part in us working out what good relationships could look like and what peace and reconciliation could look like, that felt a really important thing.
And over all of those things, what's the thing that stands out for you as something that you feel that has made such a difference? That's the sort of thing I really feel, that's my legacy. You're not that old, like Tim. I mean, you're going to have more, but I'm just asking.
Yeah. What I think is my legacy.
I think you're doing it now. I think you're doing it with something called Circle of Change.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Well, certainly that feels like something that is really developing. I think there's been things. I think in Tearfund, I think the Make Poverty History campaign, the IF campaign, felt really big and exciting, and there was a few of those things. I think setting up Tearfund in the Republic of Ireland, or supporting people to set up Tearfund, felt like a really long-term thing, and they generate £1 million a year, and I'm really proud of that. But our Circle of Change has felt personally there's probably been little else that I've done professionally that's impacted me so personally.
Tell us a little bit more about what it is and what it does.
So the Circle of Change is a group of 15 people it's like a microcosm of Belfast. That's what we try to bring together. So we've purposely done it as 15. So it's people who are representative of the diversity of Belfast. So we have male, female, gay, straight, different ethnicities, different religious backgrounds, and actually most interestingly of all, very often, different income backgrounds, lower income, middle income, high income. We meet for dinner 8 times over 8 months, once a month. And for the first 4 conversations, we hear each other's stories, and we do that psychologically safe way.
Inspired individuals.
Yes. And we learn about Belfast through those stories. And in the second 4, what happens is we then come together as a group, and we use the skills and gifts and abilities of the group to to contribute towards a better future. So landing that in a story. In the first group, our second night, the question was, what's your defining story about living in Northern Ireland? And a hand went up at the back. And this lady said, I'll never forget it, this was 2018, she said, people throw dog poo at my children. What do I tell them? And so that for the group, for all the white folk in the group, that landed as a complete shock. Because at that point we knew we were a sectarian country, but I had no sense we were a racist country. And it doubly hit me because that lady lived very close to where I live, half a mile away from me. No one's ever done that to my children. And we had a series of stories like that of goodness. And we discovered with the race one, goodness, when we did the research, wow, there's been more racial incidents at that point in Belfast than there were sectarian incidents. Yeah. There was also a woman who came from a suicide prevention charity, and suddenly we discovered Belfast was the mental health capital, or mental ill health capital of Western Europe. I didn't realise that. I'm a qualified social worker, didn't know. And that was very profound to realise there's so much out there that I just didn't know, because I live in a very bubbled world, for me, a middle class, middle income kind of world. But the power of the group then was that we went and said, well, we were going to do something about that, particularly those racism stories and those mental health stories. And that group said, I'm going to put some money in the pot. I'm going to ask my friends about that. And unbelievably, that group raised £55,000. Now, we had some bigger contributions, but mainly it was folk, middle of the road folk. And then we did this lovely thing, and this is the powerful thing of the group. We then essentially said to the voluntary and community sector, we have £55,000. We want to do something good about race and mental health. Pitch us your best ideas. And so we got 60 applications. And together as a group, we then chose 6 projects to invest in. So that process was really powerful. I remember a particular moment where a young homeless woman was really rightly arguing with a businessman, with a young homeless woman saying, we need to focus on this because this is really needed. My friends need this. And the businessman saying, but the money doesn't look good. Their economic status isn't good. They need to think about their business plan. Very healthy. And that led us to 6 projects which we were able to invest in. And my favourite one was we invested in a project for black teenagers to learn how to do computer coding. And that was so powerful for that mother who had seen her children be abused, and to feel that some good has come out of that. Didn't change it, it hasn't impacted racism in Belfast, but it has made a little bit of a dent, and it's given her a bit of dignity. We also funded some counselling because of the mental ill health thing. Again, it hasn't made a huge change, but it's helped to make a contribution, not just for the members, but also for the hundreds of people who've invested in it. And I've seen over the years how much there's the good that the money raises and the investment does, but actually the real change comes through the change in the lives of people like me, who then go into other worlds and with a greater degree of understanding of we've got to do more to tackle whatever the social issue is, racism, mental health, whatever.
When you've done that, do you do another round? Do you then say, we raised this money, we did this good stuff with it, let's do it again? Or do you get a different circle? How does it work?
We go into we start a different group. So we literally last night, we started group number 6. And that's part of the power of it, because it's not saying we want you to be the BB captain for the next 30 years. It's saying we want you to go on this journey. We hope that this will help you. It helped me lean out of my bubble, connect to other people safely, and work together with others who are different. And we're hoping that that will help other people, will help you in your future.
How do you find the people who are very different to you? Is it just because of your circles, your wider circles, or how do how do you, I suppose, inspire people to be a part of your circle of change?
Yeah, that I have a spreadsheet where I've all of the different.
I might have known.
Yeah, there's a spreadsheet, and there always comes a point where you're chasing down one or t'other of whatever minority groupings.
Oh, you've targets on it.
Well, yes. So it feels slightly countercultural, but you need it to try to create the diversity. I guess we use different networks. We get a lot of community folk through the community networks. Initially through the community foundation, they were able to connect us into people who may be willing to give towards the group more generously. And so it's almost a piece of systems thinking. Who do we know that might be interested in this, and who's in their world, and who could they ask for us? And actually, the one that we've just done last night, we've done with East Belfast Mission, and it's actually worked very well. They're a centre who connect to lots of different people. So we have service users, we have staff, and then our trust, the 174 Trust, similar thing. So we have service users and staff from it. And so that has been a lovely way. And it actually creates a lovely bit of connection within the organisation as well.
So Tim, one of the things that we really would like to ask everybody who we have a wee chat to on our podcast is around, we think everybody, as you know very clearly, have the potential in them to make a big difference in their wider circle, in their community. What advice would you give to people if they just want to take a little step? Because not everybody feels they can change the world. But actually, there's something coming out of what you're saying. I'd be interested to know what advice you would give.
I think I'll answer that very personally. What has helped me is to lean out of my bubble. So that, going to the States, travelling internationally, even just going to North Belfast or in the circle of change and listening. And in doing that, I discovered both need in the world that touched my heart, but also like possibility that I couldn't maybe have imagined before. And I guess the circle of change is a perfect example of that. I discovered racism and mental health, and I discovered a group of people who were complete strangers that wanted to do something brilliant about that. And I think, and then working with those people to do that. And so that's the piece of advice. How can we do it how can we do it together? It starts with listening, and it's about tuning into the need and the possibilities.
I'm struck by how much you've talked about leaning out of a bubble. And in many ways, you've often leant out of the church Christian bubble and said, I need to meet other people. Mm-hmm. If only more people could do that.
Mm. Yeah, I have. It has been really enriching for me. There's been cost to that as well. But ultimately, it has really helped me to become more fully who I am. And, fundamentally, that's probably where I've got to in life, about how do I be most fully Tim. And I've discovered that by doing that, those folk who are there help me to do that. So I feel really appreciative of that, of the gift they've given me.
Tim, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really interesting.
Our thanks to Tim, and our thanks to you as well for joining us on Inspired to Act. If you have a thought, you can send us a text from your podcast app. We do love hearing from you.
And why not check out our work at thriveIreland.org. Find Thrive Ireland on Instagram and Facebook too, and there's a YouTube channel.
And we've lots in the works for the rest of Series 3, so we'll be back with you very soon. For now, bye-bye.
Bye.